Welcome back to Opening Statements. This morning, we want to shine a spotlight on the case of a missing mother of 8 out of Michigan. Heather Kelley disappearing back in December of 2022 after leaving her home. Now, her disappearance then quickly turned from a missing persons case into a murder investigation after police found blood and other signs of violence inside of her burned up abandoned car. Now, more than a year after her disappearance, officials have made an arrest.
Heather Kelley was last seen December 11, 2022. We have reached a point in this investigation where we are going to take the next step. That means criminal charges. We have this morning charged Carlos Vance Watts Jr. with the offense of murder for causing the death of Heather Kelley. I'm certain that you will have lots of questions about the case. I want to inform you that I will not be discussing any of the evidence in the case. I'm specifically prohibited ethically from doing that. I will tell you this with regard to the evidence. Heather Kelley's remains have not been recovered. We are moving forward with the charges in spite of that.
Now, despite not being able to lay her to rest, her family has told prosecutors that they're relieved with this news of the arrest in the case, the arrest of her boyfriend, Carlos Watts. We have two great guests joining us on the program to do a deep dive into this and really talk about what's at the heart of this relationship. Domestic violence is what it seems to be, according to what police have put out there. Still with me, parenting and family relationship expert, Dr. Sue Kornbluth, and want to welcome in the Director of Prosecution Projects at Florida International University, former homicide prosecutor, former domestic violence prosecutor, attorney Melba Pearson. Melba, welcome. And I'd like to begin with you, please. When we think about the dangers of domestic violence, I mean, this is scary stuff. And this is a woman who adored her 8 children and had called and said, I'm going to be home. I'm going to be home to see you, and then never returned home. She was also on again, off again with Mr. Watts in this what appears to be a very toxic relationship, and officials say a very abusive relationship as well. Would you speak to the lethality at play in a relationship like this one when you have a dangerous batterer trying to control someone?
Absolutely. So, of course, good morning, Julie, and Happy New Year to you and my fellow colleague on this morning. So looking at this case, first of all, it's incredibly heartbreaking from the standpoint of she has a family that loved her. She was devoted to her kids. And unfortunately, she was in a relationship with the wrong person. One of the most dangerous times in any kind of abusive or toxic relationship is when one party tries to leave. And we don't have the full story yet, but just my reading of the situation, it seems to me that maybe she decided to move away from this relationship, maybe tell him she no longer wanted to see him and she wanted to move on with her life, with her children. Maybe she started dating someone else after ending this relationship, and this caused intense jealousy because, again, remember, when it comes to domestic violence, this is about power and control. This is not about love. This is not about, some other kind of misguided thought process. This is purely about power and control. So when the abuser feels that control slipping away, they then engage with violence to try to bring the person back in, to use fear and domination to keep them in the relationship.
Melba, so well said. Such great information from you. I want to share with you both some information we pulled from the indictment that really gives us an idea as to what happened here. Police say that Carlos admitted to killing Heather by striking her in the head with a blunt object and then disposing of her body in a dumpster. Carlos, who investigators have learned was controlling, obsessive, and possessive over Heather, did not trust her. My goodness. So it seems like it doesn't make sense. If you want to exert control over somebody, so kill them? I mean, Dr. Sue, help us make some sense of this psychologically in the mind of a batterer, as it appears to be the case with Carlos Watts.
Right. So what happens in a lot of these circumstances is the perpetrator becomes so obsessed with not wanting to be abandoned. Okay. I think that's something that is really important for people to know in domestic violence instances. And because of that, they think within their own mind that if I can't have her, and she's going to leave me, then nobody else is going to have her either. And this is the mindset that they are in. And they will do anything to control them and keep them there. And just like my colleague said, too, when somebody says that they are going to leave, this type of person with this psychological profile, they implode and they cannot control their impulses anymore. And Julie, it's as if they snap. And it's extremely, extremely sad, because what is lost here? The life of a wonderful, beautiful woman, and she doesn't have the opportunity now to be a mother to her children.
This is so helpful. You both, I don't have to tell you, you're brilliant women, very successful in your respective fields. And what you just said really paints a picture to help everyone understand domestic violence. As you said, Melba, you know, when the batterer loses control, when a victim leaves, is trying to exit. And Dr. Sue, psychologically, in the batterer's head, you noted that they're afraid of the abandonment. That's one of their biggest fears. And this is just a lethal recipe here for what's to come. I mean, it is just so scary. Investigators looked at some Facebook messages as well. We want to share some of what they uncovered in the Facebook records, indicating that Carlos and Heather had a very tumultuous relationship for months leading up to her disappearance. The messages indicating Carlos was controlling, routinely accusing Heather of cheating. His controlling behavior included demands to watching Heather sleep by way of video chats and calls, and contacting her to spy on her children. I mean, the lengths that some people go to. Melba Pearson, I'm sure nothing shocks you after all your years of practice, but when you think about the lengths that someone trying to keep that control, as you said, you know, will go to even, you know, involve the kids. Would you speak to that, please?
So that's definitely disgusting, but at the same token, not unheard of. Because again, children by nature don't always understand all the nuances of what's happening and what's happening in the relationship. So sometimes out of a desire to please, they may be like, well, I really like this guy, my mom's with him. You know, if he just asked me to go check in on my mom, maybe that's not such a bad thing. So he's using and manipulating the innocence of the children in order to further his you know, desire to keep control. But another thing I want to note, that was a couple sentences down, you know, in the affidavit, he made the statement to her, "You make me want to hit you. You make me want to hit you." Let's be very clear. This is a very classic manipulation tactic that defendants and abusers use by basically turning it around on the victim, saying, this is your fault. You make me want to commit these acts. If you would only act this way, if you would only answer your phone when I call you 30 times a day, if we would only, you know, dress in a more demure manner, if you would only stop working so that you can be fully financially dependent on me and then I can have full control of your life, then you wouldn't get hit. So again, it's that mind games that keep happening, which of course bleed into the cycle of violence, or what is known as the battered person's experience, where you have this back and forth where the person's in the relationship, they leave, they come back. So it becomes very complex because of the manipulation that's going on.
Yes, Melba, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Thank you. Dr. Sue, help us take it a step further. So what is the batterer trying to do to the victim when they say, you make me want to hit you?
Gaslight them. And I'm glad that, you know, we just talked about that for a minute, because what gaslighting really is, you know, twisting the person's perspective on what is happening to induce guilt and confusion about the reality of what is happening. And they will often say, you made me do this, or that's not what I said. Are you crazy? It's another controlled and manipulative tactic to exert power over someone. And what begins to happen is your psyche starts to get weaker and weaker, and you start to feel guilty and oftentimes believe what this person is trying to manipulate within you. This young man has some serious mental health issues, and I'm sorry that it cost the life of the mother of his children.
Isn't that the truth? But I'm so glad we're talking about this. Gaslighting is so prevalent in domestic violence cases.
Yes.
Understanding what it is and how it can happen to you is really key into having your wits about you and understanding that there are resources available to get out safely if you find yourself in one of these instances. We have a little bit of time left. I want to play something from the district attorney where he's talking about Carlos Watts' criminal history at that press conference yesterday. Let's watch.
This is not Carlos's first run-in with law enforcement.
It is not. Mr. Watts does have previous convictions. At the time of this case, he was on supervised release. He has been being held on escape charges in the federal court system. That is what he's scheduled for sentencing for on Friday.
And this guy cut off his monitor. That's how he escaped. He cut off his ankle monitor, which, of course, now brings up the question, why was he on that level of supervision? Why wasn't it bars holding this maniac back with this violent criminal history, this pattern of abusive behavior? I want to go to you both for some final tips for all of us. You both know I love to talk about domestic violence education and prevention. And so this is so horrible what happened to Heather Kelley, and her memory is going to be kept alive. Our hearts are going to stay with her kids as we go through this process. But final quick tip, a tip from each of you for anyone who may be watching this right now and thinking, oh my gosh, I could be, God forbid, like Heather Kelley because of the dangerous relationship I think I'm in. What would you tell them, your best tip? Melba, to you first, please.
So first, there is the domestic violence hotline. So that is one way. It's a national hotline where you can get information about that. If you are in a domestic violence situation, be very careful about accessing these types of resources in a place that your abuser can find it. So in other words, do that search at work. Don't use your cell phone. Use a library. Use a friend's phone to be able to get that information and get yourself safe.
Great tip, Melba. Thank you. Dr. Sue, to you, please.
Trust your gut. If you are feeling as though something is wrong and it's making you feel uncomfortable over and over, and you do not feel safe, that is a time to call for help. You can stand in your power. You do have choices, and you can reach out for help to get out of your domestic violence situation.
Great tips. You ladies are awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Sue Kornbluth, attorney Melba Pearson. I hope to have you both back very soon. When we come back after this break, our legal eagles are going to